The small industrial town of Anniston, Alabama, in the 1930s was the type of place where everyone knew their neighbors, where church socials were the highlight of the week, and where scandal traveled faster than the noon train to Birmingham. It was here, on June 4th, 1933, that Audrey Marie Fraser entered the world, a child who would grow up to become one of America's most calculating female killers. From her earliest years, Audrey displayed an unsettling duality that would later fascinate criminal psychologists. To teachers and neighbors, she appeared as the perfect Southern girl, polite, well-mannered, and bright. But behind closed doors, young Audrey exhibited disturbing behaviors that hinted at the darkness to come. Former classmates recalled her habit of telling elaborate, completely fabricated stories with such conviction that even adults believed them. More troubling were the incidents of animal cruelty that several neighbors witnessed but dismissed as childish mischief. At age 17, Audrey married her high school sweetheart, Frank Hilly, in a ceremony that seemed straight out of a storybook. Frank, a hard-working pipe fitter at the local foundry, was the epitome of post-war American masculinity, strong, dependable, and devoted to his family. For the first few years, their life together appeared idyllic. Frank worked long hours to provide for their growing family, while Audrey kept their modest home and cared for their two children, Carol and Mike. But by the mid-1960s, cracks began appearing in this perfect facade. Audrey developed extravagant tastes that far exceeded Frank's blue-collar salary. Department stores across 3 counties knew her by name as she wrote bad check after bad check, always promising payment was coming next week. When local businesses finally cut her off, Audrey found another way to fund her spending. She began systematically seducing her various employers, trading sexual favors for promotions, raises, and under-the-table cash payments. Former co-workers at the Anniston Medical Clinic, where Audrey worked as a receptionist in 1972, later told investigators about her shocking behavior. She'd disappear into the doctor's lounge for 20 minutes and come out with $100 in her pocket, one nurse recalled. We all knew what was happening, but in those days, nobody dared say anything. As Frank worked increasingly brutal overtime shifts to pay off Audrey's mounting debts, their marriage became a pressure cooker of resentment and suspicion. Friends noticed Frank's health deteriorating. The once robust tradesman now looked gaunt and exhausted. Then, in the summer of 1975, Frank began experiencing mysterious symptoms that would mark the beginning of the end. The first signs appeared in June 1975, when Frank Hilly started complaining of severe stomach pains and nausea. At first, he dismissed it as indigestion from the greasy diner food he often ate during lunch breaks. But when the symptoms persisted for weeks, Audrey insisted he see a doctor at the clinic where she worked. Initial tests suggested hepatitis, though the doctors noted some unusual aspects to Frank's condition. His skin had taken on a strange, yellowish pallor, and he complained of a persistent metallic taste in his mouth. Classic signs of heavy metal poisoning that were overlooked at the time. Audrey played the role of concerned wife perfectly, bringing Frank homemade chicken soup and sitting vigil at his bedside as his condition worsened. Behind the scenes, investigators would later learn Audrey was conducting her own macabre research. A librarian at the Anniston Public Library recalled Audrey spending hours in the medical reference section, carefully studying books about toxicology and poison symptoms. She checked out multiple volumes on arsenic poisoning, telling the librarian she was researching a mystery novel. By July, Frank was bedridden, suffering from violent vomiting episodes and excruciating abdominal cramps. Audrey refused to hospitalize him, insisting she could care for him better at home. Neighbors later reported hearing Frank's agonized moans through the thin walls of their house, while Audrey maintained a eerily calm demeanor during her rare appearances outside. The final days were the worst. Frank's hair began falling out in clumps, and he developed painful lesions on his hands and feet. When he finally succumbed on August 19th, 1975, the death certificate listed natural causes, a conclusion that seemed reasonable given Frank's known hepatitis diagnosis and the lack of any obvious foul play. But just 3 months before Frank's death, Audrey had taken out a 31,000 life insurance policy on her husband, equivalent to nearly 170,000 today. The insurance investigator noted some irregularities, but ultimately approved the payout, giving Audrey immediate access to more money than she'd ever had before. With Frank gone and the insurance money in hand, Audrey's behavior grew increasingly erratic and disturbing. She began lavishing expensive gifts on her children one day, then screaming at them for minor infractions the next. Her son Mike, then 18, joined the army partly to escape the toxic environment at home. But it was Audrey's daughter Carol who would become her next target. Now, 20 years old and engaged to be married, Carol had begun asking uncomfortable questions about her father's sudden death. She'd found strange receipts for arsenic-based pesticides in her mother's desk and noticed Audrey had been researching poison symptoms in medical books. Then, in early 1977, Carol began experiencing eerily similar symptoms to those that had killed her father. Violent stomach cramps sent her to the emergency room multiple times. She developed numbness in her extremities and suffered terrifying episodes of partial paralysis. Doctors initially diagnosed multiple sclerosis, but Carol's fiancé grew suspicious when he noticed Audrey always insisted on preparing Carol's meals personally. The breaking point came when Carol was hospitalized with seizures so severe they left her temporarily blind. A toxicology screen revealed shocking levels of arsenic and other heavy metals in her system. When confronted, Audrey spun an elaborate story about Carol accidentally ingesting rat poison, but the timeline didn't add up. Carol's symptoms had been building for months. As authorities began investigating, Audrey executed her most audacious scheme yet. In March 1979, she told neighbors she was traveling to Texas for experimental cancer treatment. She disappeared completely, leaving her children to believe she might be dying. Months later, a man calling himself Robbie Hannon contacted the family with devastating news. Audrey had succumbed to leukemia. The family held a memorial service, unaware they were victims of an elaborate hoax. While her family mourned, Audrey was very much alive and already crafting a new identity in Florida. Using forged documents, she became Robbie Hannon, a grieving widow who claimed to have lost her husband in a tragic boating accident. Her transformation was so complete that she even secured a marriage license with an unsuspecting man named John Homan. The marriage didn't last, but it gave Audrey time to refine her backstory and establish new documentation. By 1980, she had disappeared again, this time resurfacing in New Hampshire as Terry Martin, a name she'd stolen from a gravestone in a Florida cemetery. Working at a small printing press, Audrey built a reputation as a quiet, hard-working woman who occasionally spoke of her supposed amnesia. For 3 years, Terry lived under the radar, carefully maintaining her cover story. She told coworkers she couldn't remember anything before 1979 due to a mysterious accident. When pressed for details, she would tear up and change the subject, a performance so convincing that several coworkers took up collections to help pay for her supposed medical bills. But in late 1982, Audrey's lifelong arrogance finally betrayed her. A bad check written at a Manchester department store triggered a fraud investigation that slowly led authorities to connect Terry Martin with the wanted fugitive Audrey Hilley. The arrest in the book press parking lot on that freezing January day in 1983 marked the beginning of the end. Audrey's calm demeanor during interrogation unnerved even seasoned investigators. She admitted her real identity with startling nonchalance before casually mentioning the ridiculous poisoning accusations in Alabama. Only when faced with irrefutable evidence, including exhumation results showing Frank's body contained 40 times the lethal dose of arsenic, did her facade finally crack. The 1983 trial became a media circus as Audrey spun increasingly fantastical defenses, from CIA conspiracies to claims of dissociative identity disorder. The jury took just 4 hours to convict her of murder, resulting in a life sentence. But true to form, Audrey had one last act of defiance, a daring 1987 prison escape during a blizzard that ended with her frozen corpse found just yards from freedom. Forensic psychiatrists who studied Audrey's case remained divided. Was she a sociopath, a psychopath, or something even rarer? The cold, calculated nature of her crimes suggests a level of premeditation that still chills investigators today. Even more disturbing are the unanswered questions. Was Frank her first victim? How many other identities did she assume during her fugitive years? And most hauntingly, was there anyone this Black Widow wouldn't betray to get what she wanted? Audrey's story endures as one of America's most disturbing cases of domestic treachery, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators don't hide in alleyways, but in plain sight, behind warm smiles and carefully constructed lies. The name on her gravestone may be real, but the woman buried beneath it was a fiction to the very end.